Alright, so, like I said, I'm going to be going through these verses one by one and break them down. However, there's one question that I kind of want you guys to think about in the back of your mind as I'm working through these. Now, that question is, who does your life belong to? Now, I don't want you guys to think about it. Anybody a Marvel fan? Anybody remember, I think it's in Infinity War, the first time that Chris Pratt meets Doctor Strange, and they kind of start fighting each other, and then Doctor Strange asks, what master do you serve? And Chris Pratt goes, what am I supposed to say, Jesus? Do you remember that scene?
Yeah.
Right. So that's not necessarily what I'm talking about when I'm saying who does your life belong to. Right? I think I'm talking about more in your actions, in your thoughts, in the way that you speak to people, in the way that you do things, the heart behind things. Does that make sense? So like I said, keep that in the back of your mind. Who does your life belong to? Okay, because your life is going to belong to something. Whether it's a sports team, a job, college, school, a girl, a boy, like you're serving something in your life, right? So we're going to start in verse 1, and it says, I appeal to you therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. So a few things I want to explain here, because this verse can be kind of confusing. When Paul's writing about bodies, he's not talking about just your physical body, right? So it's not just the physical things that you do, right? But it's again, your entire life. The things you say, the way that you speak, the thoughts, the things that you do when you're alone. Like that's what he's talking about, your entire body. Now, when he says living sacrifice, the reason that he has to specify living sacrifice is because people are still living in kind of like an Old Testament time where there was true sacrifices, right? So they would take the unblemished lamb or the unblemished calf, like the perfect young calf, and they would go and actually kill these things and sacrifice them to the Lord. It's not asking you in this text to die, right? And now there are martyrs of the faith, there are people that have died for their faith, but that's not what this is talking about, okay? It's just living your lives in a way in service of Him. Right? And it's because of the sacrifice that Jesus made for us on the cross that we no longer have to have those physical sacrifices. Okay, and the very last thing is the spiritual worship. And I always want to touch on this because when I was y'all's age, when I think about worship, I always thought about singing. I only thought about music. But this is more than just singing. Right? Singing is worship. That's very important. But it's every action that you do should be in service of the Lord. Does that make sense? Now, one thing for me, whenever I was y'all's age, I actually really struggled with this verse. A lot of you guys know my story. You know that the way that I lived on Sunday was very different than the way that I lived the rest of the week. Right? I had a pretty bad drug problem. I like to drink. I like to party. And so I really struggled with this because I kept feeling like I can't come to the Lord because there's no way that my life is a sacrifice. Like I have to fix myself before I come to the Lord. I have to change who I am. I have to change the way that I live my life before I can come to the Lord. Right? The problem with that now that I'm here is I only took verse 1 into account. Right? And the Bible all works together. Right? So you can't take verse 1 without verse 2. Right? And so when we dive into verse 2, it says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. All right, so the big thing I really want to focus on here is that word transformed, right? Because that's really what connects verse 2 and verse 1, is that transformed, right? And that transformation only comes through salvation. But I want to give you guys an example, if you guys are wondering about this, of what transformation actually looks like. All right, so you got a griddle over here that's nice and hot. Let's not burn myself. Right? So we have an egg. Yeah, Chef Steve over here. You guys watch out. Yeah, so one of you guys will get the egg afterwards, and that person is my wife. Right? So, you guys love this, right? This is what transformation looks like. Right? There's a process to it. I'm using this as an example, right, to see what transformation looks like. Okay? So, this is the idea behind the transformation, right? Is this is the life that Jesus sacrificed on our behalf. And I spill all over the table. Alright. Perfect. Now, can this ever be this again?
No.
No. Right? That's what transformation is. Right? When you give your life to Christ, you can never be a raw egg again. Does that make sense? Now, one thing I really want to touch on here that I think is really, really important, because I think some of you guys struggle with this, is, and I'm going to use a few churchy words here. Has everybody's heard the word salvation, right? Alright? Has anybody ever heard the word sanctification?
No.
Alright, it's a really churchy word, okay? So, sanctification is the process of looking more like Christ. Okay? Now, with salvation, and actually if you look up here, this is a good example of what sanctification looks like. Right? So once you become transformed, right? Once you become saved, that egg will never be a raw egg again. Right? But if you look through the process here, you have a soft-boiled egg, then you go to a medium-boiled egg, and you work your way all the way to a hard-boiled egg. Right? So when you get saved, that doesn't mean that you're never going to struggle with sins again. Right? That transformation doesn't mean that you're never going to struggle again. You're still going to, I promise. Right? I still struggle. I still have things in my life that I struggle with. Oh, is that again? It's dying. All right, I'm going to leave this up. So I still have things in my life that I struggle with. Right? What the sanctification process looks like is you grow in that. You're no longer just sitting in that anymore. Right? So I have men in my life like Ryan that when I'm struggling with something, I go to him. And I say, hey, this area of my life doesn't look like Christ. Right? So it doesn't mean that you're not going to struggle. However, to be clear, transformation also doesn't mean that it's okay to sit in that sin. Right? It's not like it's okay, how far can I go and it still be okay? It makes me think back to whenever I was in youth group. There was this group of kids, and there was like 3 or 4 guys, 3 or 4 girls that used to really, really brag about the fact that they were virgins, which is great. They would also brag about how far they would go and not have sex. That's not what sanctification is. That's not what transformation is. It's not an excuse to get by and say how far is still okay. Right? What that is, what that transformation is what in my life can I give to Christ, and does this mimic Christ? Right? So that's where you have to actually get, who does your life belong to? Okay, and that leads us right into verse 3. Right? Verse 3 says, for by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. So this is going to be super personal for you guys. This is going to be stuff that I can't answer for you. This is the Lord saying directly to you. This is the Bible saying directly to you. You need to evaluate your life. What areas in your life don't look like Christ? Right? And this is coming from a place of humility. Right? It makes me think a little bit of like when you think about how you want to. Does your life look like Christ? Think about for those of you that went to camp, right, when we came back. How on fire were you for the Lord? Now I've got a group of guys that we're supposed to be reading the Bible. I can't even get you to get 10 minutes a day. Check your screen time. How many hours a day are you spending on your phone? How much of that is in the Bible app? These are things that you have to evaluate for yourself, right? Or, to get even more practical, everybody in here got a favorite playlist? Would you listen to that same playlist if I was in the car? Good. Right? Would you text people the same way if I was in a group text? Would you talk to your boyfriend or girlfriend the same way if I was in the room? Would you watch the same things late at night if I was there? Right? And I ask all these things because everything that you do, Jesus is there. Everything you listen to, Jesus is there. And one thing I've learned in life, everything that you put in will come out. Always. What you take in will come out. Right, so this is where you have to ask yourself, right? Who do you serve? Who does your life belong to? And if you say Christ, if I go ask your friends, are they a Christian? Would they say yes? If I ask your teachers, would they say yes? When you do simple things around the house, when your mom asks you to do the dishes, do you do it with a servant's heart? Right? These are all things that I can't answer for you. Right? And if the answer is no, if there are things in your life that aren't pointing back to Jesus, what can you set up? What boundaries can you set up in your life? Who can you lean on to say, hey, this is an area of my life that doesn't look like Jesus? These are areas of my life that I need help pointing back to Jesus. Right? That's really what I want the small group to be about. Right? I want you guys to take some time, get really practical. And I know for the guys, like you guys know, we get real. So use this as an opportunity. Like if you guys are struggling with something, lean on each other. That's what this is for. I have Ryan in my life. Ryan's been there always. When I have things in my life that I'm struggling with, that I know there's areas of my life that don't look like Christ, I call him, I'm like, hey man, this is what's going on. What can I do? What would you suggest that I set up? You know, there's people that are in my life that they struggle with watching things they shouldn't. So they come to me and say, hey, can you set up a screen time password for me? So I have the screen time password. They don't have access to that anymore. Right? Again, it's not wrong to still struggle with those things because the transformation doesn't mean you never will. But it's not okay to sit in it. Okay, so that's what I want you guys to think about. All right, so let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, just give you thanks for the day, Lord. We're so thankful.